Milsim. It will likely be the most challenging yet most rewarding experience you will ever have in gaming. But when you've been around it a while, it's easy to forget that it can be daunting when you are just starting out. In this beginner's guide to Bellum, I'm going to teach you all the things I wish I knew when I first got into Milsim. This video will cover several various topics without getting too technical and hopefully give you the knowledge to go from someone who has never played realism-oriented Milsim to someone who at the very least can be a functioning part of their squad. Although this video is targeted at new Bellum players, most of the things covered will be relevant in any serious Milsim environment. The contents of today's video can essentially be broken down into three simple categories: shoot, move, communicate. But before we move on to those, we need to cover what is probably the most common thing I see new players get tripped up on in Bellum. When you enter a server, you'll be met with the deployment screen. I highly recommend you take a rifleman or grenadier role if you can, or possibly automatic rifleman if the other two aren't available. Once you have your role, take note of which squad you have joined and whether you are in Alpha or Bravo fireteam. If you forget to do this, you can check by hitting M to bring up your BTAC once you're in the game. You can also hold Tab to bring up your watch and use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out. If you're in Alpha fireteam, your marker will be red. If you're in Bravo, it will be blue and your squad leader will always be gold. Or yellow or whatever, I don't know, I'm pretty sure I'm colorblind. The other markers that you see that are the same color as yours are now your boyfriends or girlfriends, whatever tickles your fancy. But your most basic job from here on out is to stay within VoIP range of the rest of your fireteam. Everyone loses situational awareness from time to time, or you accidentally follow the wrong person. It happens, so don't worry too much, but do your best to get back to your fireteam ASAP. Wandering off not only affects your game, but it is going to take up mental bandwidth from your fireteam leader, whose job it is to keep track of you and direct your fires, which in turn affects the rest of your fireteam and then the rest of your squad. So know what squad you're in, know which fireteam you're in, and stay within VoIP range of your FTL unless instructed otherwise. With that out of the way, we can now move on to our three main categories: shoot, move, communicate. Now, as I mentioned, I'm basically covering all the things I wish I knew on day one. We won't be going super deep into tactics or doctrinal stuff, but if that kind of thing does float your boat, I highly recommend you check out the Warfighting Society on Discord. You will be like a kid in a candy store, I promise. And if you are a regular viewer of the channel, we will be doing a bunch of stuff for those guys in the very near future. Link will be in the description. Shooting in realism-oriented Milsim is not as straightforward as it may seem when you compare it to other FPS games. The first time you take contact in Bellum, you're probably just going to hear an eruption of gunfire, followed by someone in your fireteam screaming a compass bearing. You will most likely then spin around in circles 3 times, holding your watch up, wondering where the hell it is coming from, and then, if you're lucky enough to still be alive at this point, you might have a fair idea and start letting a few rounds off, before realizing you're shooting at bushes. If you're anything like me, you will then stop shooting thinking you're wasting ammo, only to have someone politely yell at you to keep up suppression because another element is maneuvering on the enemy. Your fireteam has just become the base of fire in a 2-part tango. Your job is to suppress the enemy and fix them in place while the maneuvering element moves to finish them. The moment the suppression stops, the enemy is now free to move and you have essentially hung your maneuvering element out to dry. To oversimplify, you should continue firing 1 to 3 rounds every 6 seconds towards known and likely enemy positions, and if your FTL is doing his job, he will tell you when to cease fire or if you need to increase your rate of fire. I want to emphasize on the known and likely enemy positions because not all suppression is created equal. As you become more experienced in the game, you will start to be able to read the fight, and you can start to tell when an enemy only knows your general direction and not your exact location based on the incoming suppression. You should be suppressing left and right of any hard cover like trees or rocks, and if there is no hard cover, then yeah, keep shooting those bushes. Before we move on to the next category, remember, you should always aim to avoid a fair fight. The easiest way you can do this is by seeing the enemy before they see you and sharing that information with your squad. If you are the first to see the enemy, prioritize offloading that information and getting as many guns on the target as possible before engaging. The only time you should shoot first is if the enemy is danger close and you are going to become compromised in less time than it takes for you to get that information out of your mouth. And even then, you still want to share that info as quickly as possible. Movement in Milsim, and real-world doctrine for that matter, is infinitely deep with a vast number of factors that come into play, and honestly, with my current level of knowledge, I wouldn't even want to begin down that rabbit hole. However, if we are talking about day one knowledge, I do believe I can set you on the right track as to how to begin thinking about it. On the left, we have a squad in a tactical blob, similar to what you might find in a Reforger public match if there is some level of teamwork going on. On the right, we have what you will usually find in Bellum. Not quite an actual formation, but it does somewhat resemble a squad column fireteam wedge. If the squad on the left takes contact, chances are they're about to board an express flight back to the deployment screen. If the enemy is able to gain fire superiority and fix them in place, their options are extremely limited. Their only real hope of escaping this situation without taking casualties is if a nearby squad is able to assist rapidly. If the squad on the right takes contact, there is a chance the enemy only has eyes on the lead fireteam. They immediately take cover and return fire. The squad leader is in an opportune position to make the call to either break contact and have the trailing fireteam cover the leading fireteam's retreat, or perform a squad assault and have the trailing fireteam cloverleaf around and hit the enemy on their flank. Now, I don't want to go too deep into this and overwhelm you with information that you don't necessarily need to jump into Bellum for the first time, but I do think this paints a good picture of how you should be thinking about movement to begin with. Never put all your eggs in one basket unless you absolutely have to. Reloading. Back up. Communication is vital in Bellum and Milsim in general, so much so that if you're not prepared to do it, this is about the only time that I would say maybe you should find a different game. I know, I get it, I'm about as introverted as they come and social is my favourite flavour of anxiety, but don't let that shit stop you. So how do you communicate effectively? When do you use the radio? When do you not use the radio? What do you say? Well, if you took my advice and joined as one of the roles I mentioned, it is going to be fairly straightforward. If you are the first to see the enemy, you want to use the 3 Ds: direction, distance, and description. And that will sound something like this: contact left, 100 meters, squad-sized element. Once you get that initial information out, you can then narrow it down by giving a compass bearing, and it pays to always stay aware of the approximate direction you are facing. For example, if my squad stops for any amount of time and I have been assigned a sector to watch, I will make a mental note of my bearing straight away, so that I can just call it out without wasting precious seconds checking it once the enemy has already been spotted. Now, since you followed my advice earlier in the video and stayed within earshot of your fire team, this should be done using VoIP to avoid jamming up the radio. The radio should only be used when absolutely necessary. In Bellum, the V key is your VoIP or proximity chat, the B key is your squad net, and the N key is the command net, which you will only have available to you if you are in a leadership position. Now, if you do feel like you're ready to take on a leadership role, you will be using the radio a lot more. Since this video is meant to be focused on day one knowledge, I won't go too deep into this, but there are a couple of phrases that have helped me get better on the radio over the years. The first one is, "Hey you, this is me." For example, if you're 1-1 squad lead and you want to get 1-2 SL on the radio, it would be 1-2, this is 1-1. If you were the Alpha Fireteam leader, it would be 1-2, this is 1-1 Alpha, and the same respectively for Bravo. So remember, "Hey you, this is me." The next phrase that I always remind myself of is, it's a push to talk, not a push to think. Before you start transmitting, gather your thoughts and deliver them as concisely as possible to avoid jamming up the radio and potentially preventing other elements from getting more important info out. The last piece of advice I have for you on comms and this video is always assume nobody knows who the heck you are talking on the radio, and refer to yourself in the third person like a freaking loony. This will save precious seconds when the pressure is on. Okay, that's all I have for you guys today. If I got something wrong or you think there is a better way to do it, chuck it in the comments. I am far from an expert. I'm just a civilian who loves to nerd out on this stuff. And if you're new to Bellum, don't be shy, jump in, make the mistakes. Chances are, if you're making a conscious effort, nobody is going to care if you stuff up. In my experience, the Milsim community is pretty relaxed compared to a lot of other games, and most people just want to see you get better. Anyway, hope this helps, and I will catch you in the next one.